The team behind Super XYX have made no attempt to hide that their recently released vert is inspired not just by the almost as popular as it is vague descriptor 90s shmups, but more specifically by the classic Toaplan shmups of that decade. And in many ways, that is a bold thing to admit to, since you immediately invite direct comparisons between your game and those made by one of the most legendary studios of the genre ever. In other words, big boots. And an inevitable question, can you fill them? And from the first time I saw a trailer for Super XYX, my immediate thought was, they just might. And that is why I both chose to get the game, and having played it, reviewed it, because while there may be a little bit of wiggle room down the sides of those big boots, basically the shoe does fit. Like almost all classic arcade shmups of the era, Super XYX chucks you right into the action from the word go and doesn't let up till the final boss. There's no corridor traversal, puzzle sections or drifting set pieces. You jump into your ship, you shoot, you dodge and you bomb until you either win or you're dead. If you've watched my channel before, you probably know by now that is exactly how I like it. The systems in the game are fairly simple. You have of course your forward shot, which changes hugely depending on your character. You start with just two options, the standard spread or focus shot, but can unlock characters with more varied and unusual weapons as you progress. Your shot can be leveled up in game in two ways, one by increasing its power and two by first adding and then further powering up two pods either side of your craft. There is no manual focus fire, but you can hold down a button to slow your speed for finer movements. Slightly unusually, your hitbox is located on the nose of your craft, something that can take a bit of getting used to. You also of course have your bomb stock, and Super XYX again departs a little from tradition here by granting you a very generous allowance of 6 to start with. Each character's bomb detonating with their own unique variation, but all covering the screen and granting you a welcome few moments of invincibility. And those moments will be welcome moments indeed, because Super XYX is, as you'd expect given its inspiration, no pushover, as exemplified by the period of invulnerability when you rejoin the fray following a death being harshly short. It's not a Danmaku however, so patterns rarely get too screen filling, but what they lack in density they make up for with speed and trickery, relentlessly forcing you back and painting you into corners if you let your guard down for even a second, so that even the first stages will require some practice before you can nail a clean run. Doing so, by the way, will be of great importance for score chases, as it grants a very large scoring bonus that can be doubled by using a little trick on the stage clear screen. Scoring, while not throwing up anything terribly original, can be both fun and a challenge. The main way you go about racking up the points is by maintaining a combo which grants better medals which you do have to zoom about and collect as there's no magnet power. In a minor twist, your combo is based not on enemy kills, but rather shots landed, meaning it can easily sail up into the 3 figures on busy stages, and for more skilled players probably 4 figures. A further bonus comes through unlocking a mid-game gauntlet stage, the trigger being, I believe, completing the first 3 stages without getting hit. A slightly odd thing I found with the scoring is how many of your points are applied at stage end. It doesn't make a difference overall, but it does lead to a lack of that immediate rewarding feeling you can get when bonuses are applied during play. In terms of what you're up against, the main stages have a good flow with a mix of popcorn enemies keeping you busy between larger enemies who can soak up more damage and who have a nice variety of attacks that will keep you on your toes the whole way through. Bosses run the gamut from floating laser platforms to 2-headed dragons, and all are suitably massive and varied in both appearance and attack patterns. The escalation in difficulty as you progress feels challenging but fair, and with options to control continues, lives and the actual difficulty itself, most players should be able to see the game through to the end with a little practice. There are 6 main stages plus the gauntlet, and they are well paced, with the game being short enough to encourage replaying in its entirety, without being too short to leave you feeling shortchanged. Further to score chasing and, well, just the sheer bloody fun of playing the stages themselves, replay value is added by the game unlocking extra characters and modes gradually, rather than dumping them all on you at once, and in terms of gameplay I really have nothing to complain about. If the game does have a weakness, for me it comes from the visuals. Not that they're poorly realised, quite the contrary. The enemies are varied and interesting to look at, and the stages, especially the sea stage, are mostly very nicely done. The problem is more that, and apologies if I do a bad job explaining this, it's that the separation between ships, bullets and backgrounds seems murkier than is ideal. It's hard to explain because it's never not obvious what is or isn't a bullet or an enemy ship, for example, but nor are they different with a sort of obviousness that immediately leaps out at you. I'm not a visual artist and I don't know the details or technicalities regarding how this sort of thing is communicated, whether it's by the colour palette, changes in brightness or contrast or some other sort of special effect, but it just doesn't seem to be present here with as much immediacy as it is in the best examples of the genre. On top of this, when your weapons are at full power and the screen is crowded, it can get hard to track enemy bullets through the chaos. They simply don't stand out enough, and there are times when it's unclear whether movements around you are damage-dealing bullets, harmless thruster animations, or, particularly in the Hellfires stage, the background. This is further compounded by some of the bullet shapes, which rotate or flip about in size, leading to some ambiguity about exactly how close to them you can get. Now I want to be clear, 90% of the time, none of this is a problem, and with enough practice you'll learn the attacks and patterns and probably forget about it as an issue. But it definitely was an issue for me, even if it did little to hamper my overall enjoyment of the title. The music perfectly fits the vibe the game is going for, and reminded me at times of the soundtrack to Transformers the movie. And by that I don't mean the bloated Michael Bay monstrosities, I mean the 1986 movie-length toy commercial featuring Leonard Nimoy, Weird Al and Orson Welles that somehow turned out to be a masterpiece. In other words, the comparison is a big compliment. Sound effects are mostly fine, but while I get that they're going for that retro sound, some of the noises can be a little underwhelming, with the sound of your shot striking home often sounding more like someone drumming on the lid of a Tupperware box than heavy ordnance pounding enemy metal. Nothing too grating, however, and overall they do the job okay. Options are plentiful, with Tatty mode among a plethora of customisable elements, and using a DualShock 4 I found controller setup to be a pleasingly intuitive and problem-free breeze, as was getting the game to display how I wanted, something that if it was true of more Steam shmups would no doubt lead to me being a far bigger fan of gaming there. One other thing that should be mentioned before summing up is the devs themselves, who have been incredibly active since release and have done a fantastic job, not just talking to players on the discussion pages and responding to feedback, but actually updating the game based on that feedback, with at least 2 updates having been piped in since release. Unfortunately, that does seem to have backfired slightly, with one recent update seemingly causing a loss of progress, but despite this hiccup, such attention can only be applauded. So basically, Super XYX is a triumph. I've played some of this dev's other titles, and Super XYX feels like a culmination of their previous creations and the experiences gained along the way. It achieves exactly what it sets out to, which is basically just to be a kick-ass arcade shmup, and if I do focus on some little nitpicks and complaints, it's only because my instinctive reaction when playing this is to compare it to the best examples of the genre, and that says a lot. Overall, I would rate Super XYX an 8 out of 10, and I highly recommend picking it up. Please do remember this is a Steam review, the game is not on Switch, and unfortunately the dev did tell me that porting it doesn't look feasible in the immediate future. However, if you ever play on PC or any other device you can get Steam on, do give this one a try. There are a lot of quality shmups on that platform, and it takes something pretty special to stand out, but Super XYX has, for me, done more than enough to stick its head and shoulders out above the crowd. Let me know below if you tried this yourself. It's been out for a week or so already, and I hope it's doing the job of convincing players to get on board. As ever, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers.